start by acknowledging my very good friend, the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs, the Honorable Norbert Mao, my very good friend, Dr. Sarah Birete, and of course, my very good friend, Miriam Matembe, and General Mugisha Muntu, and all who are here, and in absentia now, the Deputy Speaker. When I was asked to speak this morning, I chose a subject which gives me the liberty to say many things about the subject of constitutionalism in the East African region. My notes will be circulated, so I may appear to be speaking extempore, but my notes are there for reference later in the evening once you are reading. When we talk about constitutionalism, it is always important to remind ourselves that the post-colonial African state is an artificial state. And I urge you to read a book that has been written by Nigeria's Adekeye Adebajo, The Curse of Berlin, Africa After the Cold War. In that book, he says many things, but relevant to my presentation is the recognition that the entities we now know as Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Somalia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and even South Sudan, comprising the East African community, are creations of an arbitrary process undertaken by the European powers in Berlin. And for that reason, when we talk about these countries and we talk about Africa and we talk about constitutionalism, we must always remind ourselves that number one, the discourse is foreign, the language is foreign, the philosophy is foreign. And when we use words such as constitutionalism, we must recognize their foreign nature. When we use words such as democracy, we must recognize their foreign nature. When we use words such as the rule of law, we must recognize their foreign nature and their lack of rootedness in what one may characterize as African culture. And therefore, when we grapple with the question of constitutionalism and even talk about constitutions in the context that we mentioned them here, we must not lose sight of that reality. We must remember that this continent was subjected to foreign rule, and the political and therefore legal cultures that we have a foreign rooting. If, for example, you know the history of colonization, you'll recognize that the Italians had their territories in the continent of Africa, Libya, what is now called Somalia, was a territory of Italy, and what they did was to impose a legal culture in these territories. The French had their colonies, and when they were living in the early 1960s, they imposed a constitution that was characterized as the Gaullist constitution after Charles de Gaulle. The Germans were colonizers but lost their territories. They lost Dahomey, now Benin. They lost part of Cameroon. They lost part of Togo. They lost Rwanda, Urundi. and they lost, of course, Tanganyika after the First World War. And these countries were then transferred to other European powers. And when they were leaving Rwanda, Urundi, they imposed a constitution that was tailor-made in Belgium. The same with the Democratic Republic of Congo when they were leaving in 1960. In Uganda, when they were leaving in 1962, in Tanzania, 1961, when the British had taken over, in Kenya, 1963. And it is not lost on me that these constitutions that were of a British kind were referred to as Westminster model constitutions. So when we who are lawyers are talking about these constitutions, we must always be alive to those realities and be alive to the fact that the constitutional order that was imposed upon African countries was alien. And that is why we actually suffer with these constitutions. I remind our audience to go to the United States of America and remember the words of the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. We hold this truth to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that it is for this reason that governments are instituted amongst men. But when they were making that declaration, they did not mean all men.